Today we're going to be walking through a tutorial on how to build entities or objects in Blockbench. This is unscripted and we do things a little different around here. We have more of a Bob Ross mentality. So mistakes are welcome and we build them into the project. If you have any other questions, please hit us up in the comments or send us a message or check out our website, outlandishlycrafted.com. Here we go. To start off, we're going to create a project. We're doing 1024 for the resolution. We do not want a box texture or UV. We want to put our file name in there with our version, date, and who did it for copyright purposes. We also want to name the object. What is this object or entity? We're going to do a throne today, so we're calling it Throne A. Box textures mean that each of the UV faces is the same. We do not want that. That does not allow us to change the size of the texture on the box and the resolution of it. You can see we get introduced right here. We have a north symbol. You want to make sure that you're always orientating, Bob Ross right there, orientating your object north if it's moving. If it's a cart or going on a train track, it needs to be left to right, so it'd be east to west. We're going to start off by creating some legs, and I'm doing this as a voiceover after the fact. I recorded this so I'll drop out for a while as it just does some things, and then I'll try to give some quick tips of what's happening. You can see a few things, tips right off the bat. I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4 to change my tools at the top. We have a few different tools. We've got the move tool, which is there. That's number 1. This is not the default quick keys. You can change these hotkeys in the settings. I like to have 1, 2, 3, 4 because they're right by my WASD keys, which I'm accustomed to from gaming. There's a few things you want to be aware of when you're creating objects. One of them's right here. When you stretch an object this far, you can see on the left I've have it's set to the default for whatever 16 by 16. I'm doing 1024 by let's see, 1024 by 1024, and I'll change that when I actually go to texture, but it gives you a good idea on the side if the texture is going to stretch. You can see because of how tall of these are, the texture is going to stretch. When I drag this down, see on the left all of a sudden the texture UV changes. Once it gets to the bottom of that box, it's going to stretch, and it's not going to be a perfect ratio for your texture size. So you want to try to not do that. If you have to, you want to duplicate the item, which I'll do here in a minute for those back two, and make them 2 items instead of 1. And you can always flip the UV to try to control the repeating patternness over large areas. Every time I do a right click here, I'm doing a duplicate. I'm just duplicating the box. I'm not worrying too much about the bone structure yet or the folders. I'll go back and add those in. You can always start that way. If you have a really good idea of what your structure is going to be, you can start by creating the core bones or the folders that the bones go into first. But that's something I'm kind of just doing this at a whims. I don't really even have an idea in my head. I did pull up a picture. I looked at a few thrones historically just to kind of get some basic concepts for the structure layout, and then I kind of just go from there. Once again, I'm not a pro at this. This is all Bob Ross style. You kind of make it up and learn as you go. We get a lot of questions on the Blockbench forum about how to do this stuff every day, so I'm not time-lapsing this or fast-forwarding. You can see this in its entirety. I think this video will probably end up being 3 to 4 hours, and we'll go through all the different steps, and you can kind of see the entire process of how I go through it in my workflow. And then we'll have a separate video that goes through the logic of adding in all of this into the game and how to make the sitting work, and there's a lot of other fun things. One of the things I'm going to show you how to do is how to make it glow. We'll deal with the transparency, so we make sure you have a transparent chair object throne, so we can do some fun stuff there. And we're going to go through all of those different things, so by the end of this you should have a pretty fancy, impressive chair or throne to show off to your friends and add into your worlds. I'm not including music in this today. I figure if you guys want, you can put your own music in for 3 to 4 hours, gathering up music for copyright and sourcing and all of that is just way too much work for for a video. You can always throw on your own music in the background, and I'll just kind of shut up. Really quick here, we're using the stretch tool a lot. You can see there's a few times that I struggle with getting the right angle when I go to stretch, and it just takes off one way or another. I don't know if that's me. It probably is, but there's just a few places where I grab it and I'm grabbing the wrong angle, and I think I'm grabbing the right angle based on the colors. I don't know if the colors just don't represent the direction. I think part of that is, especially when you have a bone inside of a bone, that becomes sometimes an issue there. Some of these things where you see there's a little gap, when you build things, rarely are things absolutely perfect. Things are rarely perfectly smooth, and especially over time with wear and tear. I, One of my complaints about Minecraft, and this just goes into theory and logic of building and what your philosophies are as you're building, and you kind of need to think through these when you start a project. Is what are you building for? Right here, really quick, we're doing the seating. So there's an add-in for seating. We go up. I select it for 2. In my experience, it seems like most of the entities I'm doing that are smaller are at 2. I did end up scaling all of this down because it looked like it was too small. And then once I put it in the game, it was too small in the game. So I'm sorry, I scaled it down because it looks like the chair's too big. But in the game, it was too small, and so I had to scale it back up in the game. So keep that in mind. Sometimes it's worth just kicking the geo out, sending it into the game, and testing it, and then making sure that you're really happy with the scaling and size. You can always rescale it, but some things don't scale equally very well. So it's just something to keep in mind if you're going to do a big project or you really care about it. Once again, I'm kind of in the Bob Ross mentality. Right here, we're changing up we're going to break up that distance on these so they don't stretch so far. Later on, we'll also do some other ways to break up those textures and break up some longer pieces. One of the things to also, let's see, I moved... Everywhere that you see those faces overlapping, you really need to deal with those. Even if you change the size of one block by 0.01, you really need to change you never want to have an overlapping face in the same perfect plane. The game that'll cause a frame rate issue in the game, and if you have that on a lot of entities, you'll see a performance hit. So you never want to have any planing, and you can always feel that by see how when I swing, see how there's nowhere that it's giving me that overlapping. So you swing the camera back and forth, and you'll see the overlap. And anywhere you get an overlap, you need to deal with it. You can try to cover it, and when you cover it up and it's not visible to the camera, and then you do your optimization, it will delete that face, and that will solve it. But you really want to work on that, and the hardest place for that is in circles. But you really don't want those faces to be fighting for who's on top in the same space. Everything we're doing here is math, and you can't have two things occupying the same space. Back to theory, I like one of my beefs about Minecraft is everything in Minecraft is sterile. Everything is perfectly clean because it's designed in a basic program with 16 by 16. There's no space for dirt. There's no space for grunge. There's no space for mistakes or errors or life or accidents or nature, growth. So that's one of the things that I try to be aware of when I'm building things. Mistakes are part of nature. They're not necessarily mistakes in a lot of cases. They're just customization. And so, in a lot of these places, if I do something and I come back and see it later, I may not fix it, I may leave it, or there may be places where you could say it's lazy, but I'm not going to spend the time for that little 1 pixel block in between a leg and the top, because you would probably glue that in real life, and we don't have glue. Um, and it's one of those things where I kind of want some of those offsets. I don't want things to always be perfectly flush. If I made this chair in real life, it would not be perfectly flush. Even if I sanded the shit out of it, the first few times you sit on it, stuff kind of just, have a little bit of give. The wood expands, it shrinks. So those are all things to be aware of when you're building anything in the world. Uh, you need to come up with your logic for uh, what world are you building? Are you building a perfectly clean, sterile world that's graphically engineered, or are you building something that's more feels in depth and in nature and more real world? And build that. A lot of times you build it into your textures, but maybe you build it into the actual model where part of the model's broken off, or it's damaged, or there's wear and tear in ways, there's a cut or there's something that you can build into it that you can't easily build into the texture, or that would add more depth if you built it in. So those are some of the things to be thinking through as you're designing um, all of these different things. I'm always also trying to think square versus slants and curves. I'm not very good at doing curves right now, so I'm not doing a lot. I'm doing a lot more square and then slants to cover. And so at some point I'll try to master doing more curves, but it's just not been something I've been good at right yet. So you'll notice this chair will come out pretty squarish in this design. To add more of that circular design or the curvish design, you can use the tool under, I think, filter, to add more of that stuff in. A few other things to talk about. I'll try to catch when I do it here, but the pivot is really critical in any design. So when you want to rotate something, where does it rotate from and to? It's right here. I click it. That little button on the right, the third set of options down, there's a little five-starred button for center, and that does a center on your pivot. So there's a lot of times that you want to pivot from the bottom of the object, and then there's a lot of times you want to pivot from the middle of the object. And there's sometimes you want to pivot by a random place or somewhere that you choose. So the fourth tool on your toolbar from the left, which I have set to button 4, number 4, is the pivot move tool or location tool, and it allows you to move where the pivot location is so that you can rotate it any way you want, and that's extremely useful. There's a horde of situations like an elbow where you'd want it to pivot from the elbow, but then you'd want to next pivot from the wrist. And so all of those things are kind of customized to what you want, and you can put them wherever you want. But it's one of the biggest questions we get is how do you control the pivot points? And a lot of people spend a lot of hours fighting the pivot system, and I think a lot of people also give up because they can't figure out how the pivot system works. So in this program, there's a adjustable pivot system, and you also need to know that if you have a folder or a host bone or a root bone or a parent bone, all the different editing programs call them different things. So when you have a bone within a bone, and you go to rotate it, you have to be careful because the rotation point may be different if the parent bone has a rotation and your sub bone or child bone has a rotation, and then you try to set the center point, that center point may be something off weird. And so a lot of times it's based on what you're clicked on. If you're having problems with your rotation point and you click the center and it doesn't go to the center of the object and you're trying to figure it out, one, you can always go to the fourth tool, which is the rotation or pivot tool. You can change it around. I just did it there. You can see I click the center point, and I do it a lot here because right here you can see I'm struggling with this where I have 6 bones within a bone, and I'm trying to rotate one bone at a time, and I keep getting issues where they're not centered. And so I click the button to center it, and then that gives me the ability to rotate it just as like a spire within that area, and that works pretty well. You can see here, and I'm just trying to break up these textures, and then I'll duplicate the whole set of bones and I'll name them. So if you wanted to rotate this entire thing, then you want to rotate it or pivot it from the core bone. But you have to keep in mind that if you take a bone from one parent and add it to another parent, the rotation of the new parent will be added. So if you had a parent bone that was rotated 45 degrees and you took a block that was in another parent bone that had no rotation and you drag it into a parent bone with a 45-degree rotation, then the bone that you drag in will have a 45-degree rotation applied to it. And it drives people crazy, especially when you're dealing with the boat and you want to update the stock boat, because people don't realize to do the stock boat you have to follow their block structure, their bone structure, sorry. And so I spent a lot of time building a big boat, and then I had to go move all of my bones around and do all this stuff to make it work in game properly. And that caused a lot of frustration because I would do something like make sails. I'd need to move it from the front parent to the back parent or something, or the bottom parent to attach it, and all of a sudden it would have a weird rotation, and I'd have to do a lot of work to get it back to where it should be. If you've already done the animation, then that throws off all your animation as well. So I highly suggest before you start doing any animation, you get through the entire process of building the object, testing in the world, making sure that the scale is right, making sure that the textures fit properly, making sure that all the bones are proper, making sure that there's no overlapping of faces and none of the bones overlap, and you're not getting any performance issues. So you can see on our system we're running at 60 frames a second, which is the goal. Sometimes we'll run at 40 frames a second, especially when we add in the high def textures. That's fine. That's our goal for high end. If you're on a mobile device or you're making for mobile devices, then you need to be probably quite a bit higher than that if your system can even do that. Keep in mind that your system may not be able to run higher than 60. Our system right now caps at 60 because of the capture card we're using. So this is a high-end computer, and we are making our mods for high-end systems. We are not making for mobile compatibility. So don't necessarily follow this to the T if you're making it for low end for 16-bit or 16 by 16 or 32 by 32 or whatever you're doing. But you can always change that and just do a lower quality texture. let's talk about a few other theory things. So when building textures and you building entities, there's not a lot of wrong. I think that people get stuck into, funny enough, a box, because it's Minecraft, and so you have to keep in mind that most of the rules and the things you've been told you can and can't do are because someone else couldn't figure out how to do them. So I wouldn't let your imagination be held back by other people's limitations or ability to not do things. I would do, if you have an idea for something or a theory that you might be able to do something, you really should try it, and you should spend a good amount of effort trying, uh, beating your head against a wall until it's bloody, and reaching out and asking for help, and seeing what other resources are out there. Because in my experience, most of the things that you've been told you can't do in Minecraft is just bullshit, and you've been lied to. Especially in Bedrock. A lot of people think that Bedrock just has very limited ability. But if you have the ability to do JavaScript, I'm pretty sure that most of the limitations are not there. You can bypass pretty much everything if you have the ability to do JavaScript. If you don't have the ability to do JavaScript or don't want to learn it, don't have the time to learn it, with JSON, there's a phenomenal amount of things you can do if you just set your mind to it. And I think most people would be pretty amazed about what you can do with Bedrock versus what they think you can do. And I think a lot of that's just because the Java people don't want you to be able to. There's a sect between Java and Bedrock, so there's issues there. But overall, I don't know if it's a Microsoft issue or if it's because it's a younger population and they just haven't tried it. There's less videos. So one of our goals over the next few months will be to bring out some videos to also show some of the other things you can do. Even for example, like glow in the dark. I think a lot of people just don't have a good idea. The extent of what you see entities glowing is pretty sad. I mean, eyes are cool. Don't get me wrong. Like that's cool, but um, that's the extent of what you could come up with. So we'll have some cool demos and things to show off over the next few months, and you keep watching the channel and see some stuff there. Sorry about the pauses. I was in the middle of helping support. I try to clear out most of these, but there are going to be some pauses in there. Feel free to exit or skip ahead. I probably won't edit these out now since I'm already doing the voiceover, and that'll mess up my voiceover. So there'll be some few pauses. Most of these pauses are me switching over to the Blockbench tech support forum or help forum in Blockbench. So if you have questions, you can always hit me up over there. I'm CyberX. I'm also streaming on Twitch, DLive, and Mixer most of the time. We have this YouTube channel as well. However, YouTube doesn't seem to like us very much, and so we got a warning doing some of this stuff in Minecraft that they thought we were spamming, scamming people. We have no idea. We challenged it, and they wouldn't let us. They denied the challenge. So we're not streaming live on YouTube. You'll find some of these how-to videos. You can also check out our website at outlandishlycrafted.com or thelazyninjas.com. And on the website, we have a forum that we're building with a lot of these how-to informations. We haven't decided if we're going to charge for that information yet. We need to find some way to make some money to just pay the bills. So we may end up charging for some of that. But we're building a database of code and examples and a lot more in detail help information, including more of these type of videos to help people go through the entire process of add-ons and modding. So if that's worth it to you, it might be something, maybe go over there and join up to support our group, and we'll see if we can we'll get you access into the group and try to help you out as well over there. There's a few things right here. You can see at the very top there's a drop down box that says bone. It also has an option for local, and it has an option for global, I believe, or universal. That controls the conceptual movement of the block. So you can see right here, if I wanted to move this block the direction it's facing, left or right, I wouldn't be able to. When you see the arrows come back up, and I'm going to actually struggle with this in a minute, but you see the arrows come back up, the arrows are going to face left and right, up and down perfectly, but not at the angle. And so if I wanted to move it at a perfect angle, I'd really struggle. I'd have to move it right, and then down, and then left, and then down, you know, and I have to really fight to get it to go. But if I go up to that drop down box, and I switch that drop down box to local, it's going to allow me to slide that box the direction I want to, versus right there I actually needed to move it left and right, and that worked perfectly for me. See right here, I need to move it left and right, and I don't want it to slide vertically. But what if I did want it to slide vertically? Then that drop down box at the top, you change that to local, and that means direction of the local box. So not the global or the bone that it's connected to, but the actual box right there. As always, you need to save your work regularly. The convention for saving the file is the model, what flavor of the model, the version of the model, and the version should be prefixed with a V for version, so v0001, v0002, and as you progress that number will go up. When you get to 10 it's v010, and then v011, and so on. When you get to 100 it's v100, and then when you get to your full release version that you release to the public, you could say version 1, so it'd be 1v and then 01. So that would be full version 1 or release version 1, production release version 1, and then a minor version of 0.01 or 0.00. And as you go, you can continue that on to track your version progress. You want to do this of every entity, texture file, pretty much everything you do. Anything that you touch or you modify, you need to name, version, date, and put who created it. A lot of people would say, well, but that information is built into the metadata of the file. But that metadata is what we call fluffy data, and that data can be changed and modified at any point. It can be removed, and so can a file name. However, a file name is a legal entity, and so having that information in the file name allows you as the copywriter to show that that's your legal property. It also has the date in it embedded, which will help you if they ever get separated or copied or removed and the date stamps get reset. It gives you an idea of when those were created, and it marks them as that copyright date for creation date. You also have the version, and you need to track the version across all your stuff. And you have the actual model name itself, and then its flavor. Now flavors can be different things. So in this case we have throne A. Now we'll probably end up having 20 or 30 thrones, and so we'll end up just doing throne A, B, C, and D. Now this is the CyberAxe throne, and I could say CyberAxe throne or CyberAxe throne A, and I kind of go back and forth on that. But in the long run, when you put something in the game, it's a lot easier to say rock A, B, C, D, and E, and F and have a definition somewhere what those are, or just know what they are, or have them defined in the game in the player text, versus trying to put all that information into your file name and when you're coding. So when we go to add this into the system, it's a lot easier to code chair A, chair B, chair C, or chair D, versus coding CyberAxe throne chair A or something, and then having all the different names. There's a lot more chance for mistake and failure rate, and you want to limit the failure rate as much as possible when you're doing tasks that you repeat over and over and over. So one of the other things to think about in design is the accents, and trying to attach the different places and cover up corners and the sides. So you can see I have a few different corners here that I'm trying to look at. I'm also just trying to show off the different things and kind of look at. I'm trying to, in the process of this, you're always brainstorming. You know, what do you want this to look like, and how do you want it to shape out, and while at the same time thinking through the process of wood cutting and how would you actually build this chair in real life, and how would these actual connections be made, and how would you cover up the joints, and how would you make it stronger so that it would stand the test of time. So here you can see I'm moving this with that local that we talked about earlier. Now the arrows point diagonal, the direction that it's facing, instead of pointing left, right, north, south, or east, west. And so that allows me to move it at a different angle. You can just flop that setting. Now if those settings aren't on your toolbar, you just click the dots, go into the toolbar, search for those different ones. I'm not even sure what that one's called, but you'll see it in there with the drop down, and then you can add those into your toolbar. Another toolbar icon I would add is the auto shrink or folder collapse, all collapse. You can see that it's the fourth icon on the right column where all of the bones are. There's a I don't know, it's little lines, they're all little lines. It's right under the outliner where it says outliner. It's the fourth icon to the right. That will collapse all of the folders. So when you have a lot of folders going in a real big project, you get them open and it's just a lot of scrolling, and you click that, they all shrink into their parents, and then makes it a lot easier to find and get around. I'm going to back out for a little bit and let you guys just watch through the rest of this, and I'll jump back in if I see something, or jump back in for the texture point. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about expectations of what what to expect in doing development and building mods. A lot of you, this will be your first time doing any development or building a mod or doing any of these type of things. And one of the things that we found in support, and I've learned over 30 plus years of doing this, is that a lot of these conversations aren't being had, and there's not a lot of education and information being given out to the community to help with these concepts. And people that want to start development don't have a expectation, or have they don't know the etiquettes of development. So I wanted to take this time in a long video like this to just talk about some of the etiquettes of development and the development process. So there's a few things that we should just talk about right off the bat. What is development? Development is very self-centric learning and education by reading documents, typically very stale spec documents that say how to do stuff. You can access a lot of these on the Blockbench website. Blockbench has some, but the Minecraft Bedrock dev site has all of the dev information about everything from Microsoft. So you can read through the development information that defines what each of the fields are and what each of the calls are into the API, which is just into the software to tell Minecraft to do something. So if I want my block to, or my entity to jump, then I put Minecraft dot jump into my entity behavior file, and my entity will now jump. So I have to be able to self-learn and be able to open that document and read that document and take that information and then put that into another document and see a cause and effect, and it'll either work or it'll fail. If it fails, then my course of action is to turn on the logging in Minecraft. Logging is your friend. The point of logging is to tell you what's going on. A lot of people hate logging because they always feel like it's their enemy, but it's actually your friend. It's there to help tell you what's wrong and to give you a warning of something's happening that's not supposed to be happening, or a mistake was made. And so you can turn on the logging in Minecraft under your profile settings. There's a GUI or GUI and a log file creation. When you open your game up and you go into your world, it'll scroll through a whole bunch of errors if you have them in the GUI, in the interface, and then they'll go away. And as you look at stuff, they'll pop up other errors if there's an error there, and it'll help you troubleshoot and diagnose problems. Now, when you close down Minecraft, you can go open up that log file, which is in the Minecraft folder on PC, and you can get that exact location in the support forum or just Google it. But that location then has log files, and you open the log file up, and it's going to say at this time such and such didn't work. So such and such entity thrown did not have a render controller, and so it showed up invisible. And so the number one problem people have when they put a entity into the world is it shows up invisible because they don't create a render controller. And the log file tells them that they didn't create a render controller, but instead of going to the log file first, or going to the documentation first that says you have to create a render controller, or watching a tutorial to follow to put you through the steps, people come to support forums first and ask a question like, how do I build an add-in? And that's very unproductive for the entire development community, because in essence we consider that hand holding, and development is anything but hand holding. There's no space in development for hand holding because it's all about what you want to do in your world and what you're making up and you're creating, and you need to learn the logic of all of that to make what you want. You can't take the logic someone else is using and apply it to your world and it just work. That's not how development and programming function. You have to be able to understand the logic, take the code and the logic of the code, and properly stick it in to where that logic should be. And because you can do anything, that becomes the curse and the blessing of development. You can do anything, but you have to, there's no boundaries. You have to create the boundaries. And because of that, you have to learn how there are boundaries and where those are. And the only way to do that is literally to fail and fail and fail and fail and fail. And that's one of the things that most people do not understand and are not aware that development is, especially in something like Minecraft Bedrock, where there's very little documentation. There's a very small group of people doing it that know how to do it, and so you have to fight through the fire and learn by trial and error. Mainly because there isn't someone that knows your answer. I ask questions every day, and the smartest people that I can find in the Minecraft world often say, I don't know, because they haven't done it. And if you haven't done it, then you don't know if it can work or how to do it, because we didn't go to a class to learn all the boundaries. We don't know what the boundaries are. The only way you can find the boundaries is by running into them smack dab as fast as you can go. And so you have to understand that development is get a creative idea, want to do something, or get paid by someone to do something, and try it and fail and try it and fail and beat your head against the wall and try it some more and beat your head against the wall and try a different technique and try something different and verify your code and look at the logs and beat your head against the wall and fail, and then you succeed a few times and then you learn, okay, and then you document that. And when you succeed, you grow from that code. So you take the code that worked, you duplicate it, and you grow from it, and you make it more advanced and more advanced and more advanced, and you do that by trial and error. And when you get to that point where your head's bloody and you really are stuck, then you go to the support forums and you search for what's already been asked. So you search and look to make sure that you're not asking something that's been asked 1,000 times already, because time theft is the number one problem everybody deals with. We all have projects. It costs us a lot of time and effort and sacrifice to learn the information that you want. And for us to just stop and give that to you means that we're not learning anything new and continuing on. And because so many people want to know this information, it's a full-time job just to answer questions every day so that people can have their hand held. If people would stop and instead search first, which is the number one rule of any form and support, always search first. Always look for the FAQ, the frequently asked questions, and make sure you're not asking a frequently asked question. If you can't find it in frequently asked question, make sure that you go and stop in resources or guides or how to, and make sure you've gone through all of the already prepared how to guides. Because most of the problems that you've run into have already been addressed and solved in a how-to guide, and you just missed it, or you weren't paying attention, or you weren't ready for the information when it was presented to you, and you need to go back through it again so that you gather up that new information, because now you're ready for it. Many times people will watch through a tutorial one time, they'll try to do the thing once or twice, they'll fail, and then they'll go to a support forum and ask for help. And they're just missing it. The other thing that I always advise is when you good technical practices or technology practices or what do we call it? Cyber. I don't know. There's a word for it, but always look through the menus of the program when you get into a new program. If you get stuck on something and you can't figure out how to do something, look through the menus. Look through the toolbars and what you can add to the toolbars. Because often the developers and the people have already added those things in there, but they can't overload you with all of it at once. And if it's not a commonly used thing, then it'll be put in a menu. And so you need to look through those menus and just be aware of what's there in their layout and logic, so that when you do run into that spot and you say, oh man, I need to sit somebody in a chair to see how they fit, you know, oh yeah, I saw up in filters was sit location. And so because you already had a chance to see it. But if you never look through the menus, like this happens quite often. People won't look through the menus at all, and then they come to a support forum and ask questions about things that are in a menu. And to me personally, that's a hand holding thing. If I have to help you find something that's logical in a menu, and I'll typically, if someone asks, I'll go make sure that it's logical because I don't want to send you somewhere that's not. But those are the things that need to be self-taught, or that you're self discovering and learning, and you're not looking for somebody to walk you through it or to hold your hand through the process. And so that's just one of the big things that's development. There's a lot of other places and other parts of the industry that aren't like that, but it's not by choice. That's just what development is. There isn't another way around it. If you want to go to a school and learn JSON and learn stuff, you could. You could learn JavaScript in a college, but you're not going to learn Minecraft and the logic, and so it only get you 25% of the way, because knowing the language without um, the the logic behind the Minecraft side of it doesn't do you any good. And the only way to learn the Minecraft side of it and its logic is literally to do it, is to go in and just fail. I've discovered tons of things that other people said weren't possible that were very possible, and they just didn't try things that were illogical, or they didn't try them in the right combination. And so there's a lot of those things that you'll try once and it'll fail, and you try it with something else and it succeeds. And you need to build that process and go through that experience to understand. And as you do it, the more you learn, and the more you learn, the more you'll be better at problem solving other issues down the road, because you'll have problem solved those other things. So it's very important to plow through your problems, stick with it, keep beating your head against the wall. It's okay to reach out for help, but really try to go through those basic, etiquette steps of, I really tried and failed. I went through the guides. I used the resources. I checked the FAQs. I checked the logs. 99% of people that come to the support forums don't check their logs first. Checking logs should be the second thing you do. You validate your JSON files to make sure you didn't make a language error. That's the first thing you can do. You can validate that at DuckDuckGo. Search engine has a privacy-based validator. You just type in JSON validator and it pops up right there in the search engine, a box you can copy and paste your stuff to. It tells you what line the error is, and it gives you a hint of how to fix it. Most errors and problems are commas, or you didn't bracket your statement or declaration or function properly. And it's just open bracket, close bracket, and a comma between the next statement. Not a comma at the last statement, just between statements. So you're telling the program what to do. You need to tell the program that another statement's coming. That's what a comma is doing, and that's in the JSON side. And we'll cover JSON more in that video, which is coming up in the next video that we'll put out. So it's just a quick overview of some of the things. Also keep in mind that time's money. So when you're asking people to do stuff, that costs them money to stop what they're doing to help you. And you really need to value their time and be ready and have your questions together, and that you'll definitely get a lot better answer out of a yes or no question than out of a how do I do this, or can you do this for me, or can you anything that requires them more work when they're in the middle of the huge projects they're in and trying to learn advanced things. You're doing the very basics, the very beginning, and they're 1,000 miles ahead working on really advanced stuff. And so it's kind of like asking a mechanic to teach you how to drive. You don't ask your computer repair guy how to teach you how to type. You don't ask the police how to teach you how to drive. So there are the right people and the wrong people to help with all of those subjects, and you have to be aware of who you're talking to and who you're asking and what their time value is worth, and also how you phrase the questions. A yes or no question, is it possible to do this, or posting your code and being able to allow them just to skim your code and say you failed or you made a mistake here, or this isn't spelled right, or whatever. Those would get you a much better response. If you go into a support form and you get to the point where you ask a question and it's not answered, or you ask it a few times and it's not being answered, either they don't know the answer, or it's so simple that you should be able to figure it out yourself with the already generated material that's out there, the resources that are out there, and they're not willing to tell you that. I'm one of those people that decided a long time ago that I'm going to tell you, because you need to know why people aren't responding to you. You need to understand so that you can build that etiquette and you can understand what's happening. And so that's why I wanted to jump in here and have that conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of other etiquette things that are out there that you'll learn along the way. But as far as anywhere you go for support, any support forums, any discords, any websites, anywhere you're asking other people that have more information or knowledge than you, because they sacrifice their time to build that and to figure it out and do it, respect their time and their effort and try to really be ready to go and work through the problem and have it all tested and really be able to present some screenshots and your code, and you'll get a lot better response and a lot quicker response, and things will get fixed and you'll get past those gaps. I've spent years on gaps, especially on Unreal Engine. When you get into a problem in Unreal Engine and there just isn't a good resource to fix it without paying somebody, and so there's a real issue there. So if you've gotten through this and you say, man, I don't think development's for me, I don't think that I can do this, then hold up. It's worth going through the guides, because you really don't know yet. You may really find one part of this process that you enjoy. I don't like doing this modeling nearly as much as I like texturing and doing the art. You don't have to do all of it. You may find that just doing the art is your passion. Just doing the coding is your passion, and you don't want to do any of this 3D stuff. Just doing the block building is your passion. Just doing special effects and magic. So go through it. Fail through it. It's okay. It's okay to fail. I know you don't hear that in schools. You've been beaten to death everywhere that it's not okay to fail. In development, failure is encouraged. You need to be failing. If you're not failing, you're not pushing the boundaries and you're not developing. You're just copying someone else. So you want to be failing. You want to be pushing forward and all of that stuff and finding where you make mistakes and fixing them and succeeding and then breaking the next rule and continuing to work towards that. But find where you enjoy the process and then dig deep into that. If you go onto the Blockbench forums, there's job lists and there's job descriptions. This is in Discord. I just call them forums or Discord. in Discord, go into that channel, and if you want someone else to do a part of it for you, so say you want to do the art, but you don't want to do the block design, you don't want to build the entity, then put a list in there and say, I need somebody for free to please build me this design, and put some images in there and put some descriptions and colors or whatever you want. Give them some information, and then say, I'll do the texturing. And you can even say, I'll pay you $1, I'll pay you $5, whatever you have. But you can do what you want to do. You don't have to do all of development. You can build the block and have someone do the coding. Find where you're good at and what you enjoy, and excel at that, and then team up with other people that can do the other parts, and let them do it, and let them be creative in it, and you do your stuff, and work together to create something amazing. So think through that. Don't get discouraged. You will run into constant problems. I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I use everything I've experienced and all of my failures and all of my knowledge and everything to do everything I do every day. You're not wasting time failing. You're not wasting time learning how to succeed, to make things happen and make the JSON code sing and make things form and function like they should. Stick with it, because you really can excel. And Blockbench is such a phenomenal program. It will blow your mind what you can do. And you can see at the very beginning of this video, we threw in a little bit that you can see the Lazy Ninja empire world that we're building. In there you could see the Tainted Gut Tavern, and that's one of the projects that we're working on. And my throne will go in a elder's throne room in that world. So that's something I'm building for that world. I also show you the glow of the chair, which is beautiful. And those are all things I've learned through failure, and in some cases asking for help. Or another great thing to do is join the forum, especially the bridge editor for Bedrock forum, the Discords, and read through the chat logs. Go back and scan through them. Find the code snippets people put in. Read through and learn from all the examples and the failures and the problems of all those other people. You can search that information before you ask those questions, because chances are your question's already been answered. Last but not least, when you're in Discord, a majority of people do not like to be tagged. Most people do not want, if you're looking for help, for you to tag them and do it at them. You can look on the right side of the Discord to see the names of each of the different people and what their titles are. You should not be tagging the owner of the Blockbench forums, or moderators, or VIPs, or developers or designers, any of those people. The people that are in the support forums are there volunteering to do support. And when you tag someone that made the program, to ask them a basic, it's like calling down the president to ask them about a traffic ticket. It doesn't make any sense. And the cost of their time per hour could be $200, $300, $400 an hour, is how much the cost of their time is, to answer a question for you that someone like me, that doesn't cost very much time, could have answered if you just posted it without tagging them. So please don't tag people unless some people say DMs on, some people say you can tag me in the little line underneath them for their description underneath their name. But if they don't tag people unless they tell you that they can, when you're in a help support forum, or you're on someone else's Discord that they're not your friends. If they're your friends, have at it, no big deal. But when you're asking for someone else to volunteer to help you, and you tag them, if they're in the middle of a big project, they could lose 30 minutes to an hour just for a 2-minute question. And people don't understand that. A productivity loss if you stop your train of thought in development, it takes you 20 to 30 minutes to get back onto the same productivity level you were at before. So I have all my alerts off on all my devices. I don't have pop-ups on my Xbox. I don't have pop-ups on any of my devices except Discord. And so if you tag me in Discord, then that means I'm going to stop what I'm doing, and I could lose 30 minutes to an hour of development time because of that on a question that 10 other people could have answered. So just something else. Those are just etiquette things that nobody's talking about and telling you about. And I wanted to take the chance, as we have new developers and new people, to welcome you to the development world. It is a dog world. Also keep in mind that a lot of the developers that you see on the forums are competitors. You're asking people to competing with you, building products that could be similar, could be different, could be competing for the same viewers and gamers. So you always have to keep that in mind. So always be aware that not everybody in the forums is your friend. And if you ask stupid questions, you may have people that jump in and give you stupid, incorrect, wrong answers just to mess with you for doing it. So it's in your best interest to always research and look for the information and search for what works before you just ask random people stuff. Because there is sabotage and there's people out there that aren't out there to help you or in your best interest. So here you go. Back to the building.